Have you ever received a message that made you realize your entire family sees you as their biggest disappointment? That moment hit me like a freight train on December 15th, when I was sitting in my small home office in Seattle, exhausted from working around the clock for weeks, surviving on coffee and pure determination. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Hallie, sweetie, about Christmas this year, your brother Jake is bringing his new fiancée, Victoria. She's the lead anchor at Channel 7 News. You know, very high-profile career. We thought it might be best if you sat this one out. You understand, right? We need to make the right impression for her family. Maybe next year when things are different for you. Love, Mom." I read it once, then twice. Then I set my phone down and did something I hadn't done in months. I laughed. Not a happy laugh, but that hollow, bitter sound that escapes when reality punches you in the gut. After 17 years of grinding, 17 years of building something from nothing since I left that house, they still saw me as the family failure, the one who needed to be hidden away when important people came around. What they didn't know, what none of them had bothered to ask about in years, was what I'd actually been building in this little home office. While they assumed I was barely scraping by as a freelance consultant, something much bigger was happening, something that would change all of our lives forever. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start with that text. It starts 18 years ago, in our family home in Portland, Oregon, with the biggest fight of my life. My father, Robert Chen, had built Chen and Associates from scratch, a solid mid-sized consulting firm that helped small businesses restructure and survive economic downturns. Nothing flashy, but respectable, profitable. The kind of company that paid for our nice house in the suburbs and our family vacations to Disneyland. Dad expected all three of his children to join the family business eventually. It was never really a question in his mind, just the natural order of things. My older brother Jake fell into line perfectly. Fresh out of business school, he slid right into a senior analyst position, became Dad's right-hand man, the golden boy who could do no wrong. He had the corner office, the company car, and Dad's complete respect. My younger sister Emma was still in college then, majoring in marketing, already planning her triumphant return to take over the firm's client relations department. She was Dad's princess, who could charm any client, and had Mom wrapped around her little finger. Now, 17 years later, she runs her own successful PR agency in Portland, successful enough that Mom bragged about her constantly. Then there was me, the middle child with big ideas and an even bigger mouth. "I'm not joining Chen and Associates," I announced at dinner one night in March 2006. I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in business strategy, and absolutely certain I knew better than everyone else in the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad set his fork down slowly. "What did you just say?" "I said I'm not joining the company. I'm starting my own consulting firm. I've already got 3 potential clients lined up, and I think I can—" "You think you can what?" Dad's voice was rising now, that vein in his forehead starting to bulge the way it did when he was really angry. "You think you can just waltz into one of the most competitive industries in America and succeed where seasoned professionals with decades of experience struggle every day?" Jake smirked from across the table. "Dad, let her try. She'll be back here begging for a job within 6 months when she realizes how the real world works." This is so embarrassing, Emma muttered, not even looking up from her phone. Can we please just eat dinner without the drama? But I wasn't backing down, not this time. I don't want to spend my life working for someone else's dream, I said, looking directly at Dad. I want to build something of my own, something bigger than what we have here. That's when Dad exploded. You arrogant little girl. Do you have any idea what it took to build this company? The sacrifices I made? The 18-hour days? The missed family dinners? The stress that put me in the hospital twice? Mom tried to intervene. Robert, please. No. He turned to me, his face red with fury. You think you're smarter than me? You think you understand business better than someone who's been doing this for 25 years? You're naive and selfish, and you're going to fail spectacularly. Jay couldn't resist twisting the knife. Face it, Hallie. You don't have what it takes. This isn't college anymore. This is the real world, where having good grades doesn't mean anything if you can't deliver results. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You know what? Fine. I'll show you what I can deliver. And I walked out. Not just out of that dinner, but out of that house, out of that life, and out of their low expectations forever. I moved to Seattle 3 days later with 2 suitcases and 3 boxes crammed into my beat-up Honda Civic. I had $800 in savings, a laptop that was already 5 years old, and a business plan I'd been working on since junior year of college. The plan was simple but audacious. Instead of just advising companies like traditional consultants, I would help them restructure and then negotiate equity stakes in exchange for reduced fees. It was risky, but if it worked, I wouldn't just be earning consulting fees, I'd be building an investment portfolio. The first year was brutal in ways I could never have imagined. I lived in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill that was so small. I could literally touch all 4 walls without moving from the center of the room. The walls were thin enough that I could hear every conversation my neighbors had, every TV show they watched, every fight they got into at 2 a.m. I ate more ramen noodles than any human being should consume in a lifetime. For months. My dinner routine was the same. 39-cent package of ramen, maybe an egg if I was feeling extravagant. Eaten while sitting on my futon reviewing business proposals and financial statements. But here's what kept me going through those darkest moments. Every time I wanted to quit. Every time I thought about calling Dad and asking for my old room back, I'd remember Jake's smirk and Dad's words. You're going to fail spectacularly. Those words became my fuel. I worked 18-hour days, cold calling executives, attending every networking event I could afford, and slowly, methodically, building my client base one conversation at a time. My first real break came 8 months in. A struggling tech startup called NeuralSync was 3 weeks away from bankruptcy when their CFO agreed to meet with me at a coffee shop in Belltown. They were desperate enough to listen to anyone with a plan. I spent 2 weeks analyzing their entire operation, their product line, their market position, their cost structure, everything. Then I presented them with a complete restructuring plan that would cut their overhead by 40% while repositioning them in a more profitable market niche. The catch? Instead of my usual consulting fee, I wanted an 8% equity stake in the company. They thought I was crazy. Who takes equity in a company that's about to go under? But I believed in what I saw. 8 months later, we'd implemented every part of my restructuring plan. 15 months after that, they'd secured $18 million in Series B funding, And when NeuralSync was acquired by a major tech conglomerate 5 years later, my 8% stake was worth $15 million. That's when I realized I wasn't just building a consulting company, I was building something completely different. By year 3, I had equity positions in 4 different companies. By year 7, that number had grown to 12. By year 10, I was quietly managing a portfolio worth over $85 million. And by year 15, we'd crossed the $280 million mark. But here's the beautiful irony of the whole situation. While I was building this empire, my family continued to see me exactly the way they always had. At the rare family gatherings I attended, maybe Christmas every other year, the occasional wedding or funeral, they'd ask about my little consulting business with barely concealed pity. Mom would slip me $200 cash when she thought no one was looking. Just to help you get by, sweetie. I know it's tough starting out on your own. Jake would offer to put in a good word for me at Chen and Associates whenever I was ready to get serious about my career. Dad would pat my shoulder and say things like, "Well, at least you're learning some hard lessons about the real world. That's valuable too, in its own way." I never corrected them. I never showed them the contracts I was signing, the equity positions I was accumulating, or the financial statements that showed my portfolio growing by millions of dollars each year. Why? Because I was proving something to myself first. I needed to know, beyond any shadow of doubt, that I could succeed without their approval, without their network, without their safety net. And there was something else. A part of me that wanted to see just how big I could get before they noticed. How successful would I have to become before they stopped seeing me as their failure and started seeing me as, well, me? By year 15, I had my answer. There was no amount of success that would change their perception, because they'd never bothered to look closely enough to see what I'd actually built. The really delicious irony? For the past 3 years, Chen and Associates had been struggling. The recession had hit small businesses hard, and Dad's traditional approach to consulting wasn't adapting well to the new economic reality. They'd been trying desperately to land bigger clients, more prestigious projects, anything that would give them access to the kind of high-level corporate restructuring deals that could save the company. And the firm they'd been chasing most aggressively, the one they'd submitted proposal after proposal to, the one that represented everything they wanted to become, they'd been so focused on impressing this mysterious company that they never bothered to dig deeper into who actually owned it. All they knew was that Pinnacle Strategic Solutions had an impeccable reputation and the kind of client roster that could transform their business overnight. Well, let's just say that firm had been watching Chen and Associates very carefully, watching and waiting for the right moment to make contact. And thanks to their desperation and my carefully maintained anonymity through shell companies and legal representatives, they had no idea they were begging for help from the daughter they'd written off as a failure, because that firm understood something my family never had. Timing is everything. So when I got that text about Christmas, when Mom made it crystal clear that I was still the family embarrassment who needed to be hidden away when important people came around, something clicked into place. It was time to stop hiding. I called my assistant, Sarah, into my home office immediately. "Sarah, remember that proposal Chen and Associates submitted last month? The one about strategic partnership and joint venture opportunities?" She nodded, pulling up the file on her tablet. "Yes, they've been very persistent. 7 phone calls this month alone. Set up a meeting. Tell them our CEO wants to discuss their proposal in person. Full executive presentation required. By year 5, I'd saved enough to hire my first employee, Sarah, a brilliant recent MBA graduate who became my right hand and eventually my business partner. Sarah raised an eyebrow. She'd been with me for 12 years now and knew exactly who the Chen family was to me. Are you absolutely sure about this? I looked at my phone, where Mom's text was still glowing on the screen, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Sarah, I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life, and make sure you tell them to bring their entire leadership team. Tell them this is the biggest opportunity in Chen and Associates' history, so everyone needs to be there. Everyone? I turned back to my computer, where the financial reports from my most recent acquisition were still open on the screen. Numbers that would have made my father's jaw drop. Numbers that represented 18 years of proving that his arrogant little girl knew exactly what she was doing. Everyone, Sarah, every single member of the Chen family needs to be in that room. What was about to happen would not only change my relationship with my family forever, it would become the most satisfying hour of my entire life. The meeting was scheduled for December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve. Perfect timing. The irony was almost too beautiful to believe. They'd excluded me from Christmas dinner. But they'd unknowingly scheduled the most important meeting of their lives for the day before. I had exactly 8 days to prepare. 8 days to plan every detail of the moment I'd been building toward for 18 years. But here's what would make this revenge truly legendary. They had no idea that the mysterious CEO they'd been chasing for months was the same daughter they'd just excluded from Christmas dinner. The same failure they'd written off 18 years ago. This wasn't just going to be a business meeting. This was going to be the greatest reveal in Chen family history. And I was going to savor every single second of their shock, their disbelief, and their dawning realization that they'd been wrong about me all along. The morning of December 23rd. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. without an alarm, for the first time in 17 years. I wasn't thinking about quarterly reports or client strategies when I opened my eyes. I was thinking about the look on my father's face when he realized that his failure daughter was about to hold his entire legacy in her hands. I spent 2 hours getting ready, not because I needed that much time, but because every detail mattered today. This wasn't just about looking professional. This was about embodying the power I'd built from nothing. I chose the charcoal gray Tom Ford suit I'd had custom tailored in New York, paired with Louboutin heels that added 4 inches to my height, making me tower over the family that had always looked down on me. Around my wrist was the Cartier watch that had belonged to my grandmother, the one person who'd believed I could be anything I wanted to be. Sarah arrived at 6 a.m. with 2 large coffee cups and a knowing smile. "Big day," she said simply, handing me my usual, a double-shot espresso with oat milk. "The biggest," I replied, taking a sip and feeling the caffeine steady my nerves. "Are they confirmed for 10 a.m.? Your father called 3 times yesterday to confirm. He sounded—" She paused, searching for the right word. Desperate. I've never heard him like that in all the years we've been dealing with their proposals. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse office, looking out over Elliott Bay. Somewhere across the city, my family was probably having breakfast, discussing strategy for the most important meeting in Chen & Associates' history. They had no idea they were walking into the most spectacular family reunion of all time. "Sarah," I said, turning back to her, "I want you to record everything. Audio, video, if possible. Not for legal reasons, for personal ones. I want to remember every single second of this." She nodded, understanding completely. "Already planned for it. I've got the conference room set up with discreet recording equipment. The whole thing will be documented." At 8:30 a.m., we made our way to the Pinnacle Strategic Solutions headquarters downtown. The building was a 47-story glass monument to success, with our offices occupying the top 3 floors. As the elevator climbed past floor after floor of other companies, other dreams, other ambitions, I felt a surge of pride. I'd built this. Every inch of it had been earned through 18-hour days, sleepless nights, and the kind of determination that only comes from having something to prove. The executive conference room on the 45th floor was perfect. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline and Puget Sound beyond. The mahogany table could seat 20 people comfortably, surrounded by leather chairs that cost more than most people made in a month. Fresh white orchids, my grandmother's favorite flowers, adorned the center of the table. Everything was designed to intimidate, to inspire awe, to make it crystal clear that whoever owned this company operated on a completely different level. "They just pulled into the parking garage," Sarah informed me at 9:45 a.m., monitoring the security feeds from her tablet. "Your father's wearing his best suit. Your mother looks nervous. Jake keeps checking his reflection in his phone camera. And Emma's... Wait." She looked closer at the screen. "Emma's here too." I raised an eyebrow. Emma rarely got involved in the business side of things. Her PR agency kept her plenty busy. "Interesting. The whole family really is coming to witness their salvation." "Victoria's here too," Sarah added. "Jake's fiancée. She looks like she's treating this as a photo opportunity." Perfect. The entire cast would be present for the performance of a lifetime at exactly 10 a.m. I positioned myself in the private elevator that led directly to the executive floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see them all seated around the table, studying the partnership proposal documents that Sarah had prepared. Documents that would have saved Chen and Associates from the slow decline that had been eating away at their business for years. My father sat at what he assumed was the head of the table, trying to project confidence but betraying his nervousness through the way he kept adjusting his tie. Mom was beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jake had chosen a seat that he thought made him look authoritative, with Victoria beside him, looking like she was already planning how to leverage this connection for her news career. Emma sat slightly apart from the others, her sharp PR instincts probably picking up on the unusual formality of the setup. They all looked so small, so ordinary, so completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Sarah appeared in the doorway of the conference room and cleared her throat, commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced in her most professional tone, "thank you for joining us today at Pinnacle Strategic Solutions. We appreciate your patience. It's my honor to introduce you to our founder and CEO." The room fell silent, everyone straightening in their chairs, preparing to meet the mysterious business leader who could change their fortunes. "Please welcome Hallie Chen." The silence that followed was so complete, so profound, that I could hear the building's ventilation system humming high above us, 45 floors above the Seattle street noise below. I stepped through the conference room doors. my heels clicking against the polished marble floor in a rhythm that felt like a countdown timer. Every step was deliberate, measured, designed to give them time to process what they were seeing. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The partnership proposal slipped from my father's fingers and spread across the mahogany table. Jake's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, before settling into something that looked like he'd been physically struck. Emma gasped audibly, grabbing the edge of the table for support. Even Victoria, who had never met me before, seemed to understand she was witnessing something historic. But it was my father's reaction that I would remember for the rest of my life. The man who had called me naive and selfish, who had predicted my spectacular failure, simply stared at me with his mouth slightly open, all the confidence draining from his face like water from a broken dam. I walked slowly to the head of the table, the real head of the table, the chair that belonged to the person who actually owned the room, and stood behind it, letting the moment stretch until it was almost unbearable. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice calm and completely professional. "Shall we discuss your partnership proposal?" For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. The only sounds were the soft hum of the building's climate control system and the distant noise of Seattle traffic far below. Then my father found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Hallie, you're the CEO of Pinnacle Strategic Solutions?" I smiled and pulled out my chair, settling into it with the confidence of someone who belonged there completely. Because I did belong there. I had earned every inch of this moment. According to the articles of incorporation, the client testimonials, and the $280 million in assets under management, yes, I am. That's when Jake finally snapped out of his shock. And I watched him cycle through the same emotions he'd probably felt that night 18 years ago: disbelief, anger, and something that looked dangerously close to panic. "This is impossible," he said, his voice higher than usual. "You were struggling as a freelance consultant. You were living in that tiny apartment just a few years ago. Mom was helping you with rent money." I laughed, genuinely this time, and the sound seemed to echo off the glass walls. "Jake, I haven't lived in Capitol Hill for 12 years. I haven't driven a Honda Civic for even longer. And as for Mom slipping me money," I turned to look directly at her, "I've been donating that $200 to charity every time you've given it to me. The Seattle Children's Hospital has a very nice fund in the Chen family name, though they don't know why." My mother's face crumpled, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "Sweetie, this is wonderful, but I don't understand. Why didn't you tell us? We could have celebrated with you, supported you." "Supported me?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment, then reached for my phone and scrolled to her text from 8 days ago. "Mom, would you like me to read your message from last week out loud for everyone? The one where you told me I wasn't successful enough to attend Christmas dinner?" The room fell silent again, and I could see Victoria shooting Jake a look that clearly said, "What kind of family have I gotten involved with?" Emma, to her credit, was the first to find her voice with something resembling sanity. "Hallie, I had no idea. This is incredible. You built all of this?" She gestured around the room, taking in the expensive furniture, the spectacular view, the obvious markers of serious wealth and power. I nodded. "From nothing, Emma. From a studio apartment and $1,800 in savings and a determination to prove that Dad was wrong about me. At the mention of being wrong, my father straightened up, and I could see some of his old fire returning. Wrong about what? Everything I said was to protect you. The business world is brutal. Hallie, I was trying to save you from failure and disappointment. No, I said, my voice cutting through the air like ice. You were protecting your own image of what success should look like. You were so convinced that your way was the only way that you couldn't see I was building something completely different. I stood up and walked to the wall where framed newspaper articles and magazine covers documented some of Pinnacle's biggest successes. Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Harvard Business Review. They all featured stories about the innovative consulting model we pioneered here. The one where we don't just advise companies, we invest in them. We become partners in their success. I turned back to face them. You know what the Harvard Business Review called it? The Chen model. They named it after me. Dad. After the daughter you said would fail spectacularly. My father looked like he was struggling to process everything, his face cycling between pride and confusion and what might have been regret. But why? He asked finally. Why keep it secret? Why let us think you were struggling? That was the question I'd been waiting for, the one that would let me finally say everything I'd been holding inside for 17 years. Because I needed to know, I said simply. I needed to know if you could love me for who I was, not for what I achieved. I needed to know if my family would value me as a person, not as a trophy to show off to their friends. I walked back to my chair but didn't sit down. Instead, I leaned forward, placing my hands on the mahogany table. For 17 years, you've had opportunities to ask about my life, my dreams, my challenges. For 17 years, you could have shown interest in what I was building. Instead, you made assumptions. You decided I was failing and treated me accordingly. Even last week, especially last week, you made it clear that I was an embarrassment to be hidden away when important people came around. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Hallie, you have to understand, Victoria's career is very public. You thought what? I interrupted. That your unsuccessful sister might say something embarrassing? That I might not know which fork to use at dinner? That I might not fit in with your important fiancé and her important friends? I reached into the leather portfolio I'd brought and pulled out a thick folder. This is our client list, I said, opening it and spreading several pages across the table. Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks, Boeing. We've consulted for every major company in Seattle and dozens more across the country. I've had dinner with CEOs who run Fortune 500 companies. I've given keynote speeches at business conferences attended by thousands of people. What? I looked directly at Victoria, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Including 3 conferences where your news station sent reporters to cover the event. There's actually a very nice clip of me from last year's Innovation Summit that Channel 7 ran during their business segment. Victoria's face went pale as she realized what I was saying. I've been hiding in plain sight, I continued, successful enough that I was literally on the news in your living room, but invisible enough that none of you connected the dots. Emma spoke up again, her voice small. We never looked closely enough to see what you were really doing. No, I agreed. You never did, because you'd already decided who I was and what I was capable of. And that assumption was easier to maintain than actually paying attention. My father cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter than I'd heard it in years. "What do you want from us, Hallie? We're here. We're seeing this. We understand that I made a mistake. A big mistake. What do you want us to do?" For a moment, I felt something shift inside me. This was the question I'd been building toward for 17 years. And suddenly I realized I wasn't sure of the answer. "I don't know, Dad," I said honestly. "For the longest time, I thought I wanted an apology. Then I thought I wanted you to be proud of me. Then I thought I wanted revenge." I gestured toward the partnership proposals scattered on the table. And I got it. Chen and Associates needs this partnership to survive, doesn't it? Without access to the kind of corporate clients we work with, without the capital injection that comes with our strategic partnerships, you're facing the same slow decline that's killed dozens of small consulting firms over the past decade. My father nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued. "I'm going to give you exactly what you asked for. A partnership with Pinnacle Strategic Solutions, full access to our client network, our resources, our expertise." Jake looked confused. You're still going to help us?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm going to do better than that. I'm going to save you. Just like you never believed I could save myself." I sat back down and pulled the partnership contract toward me. "But there are going to be conditions. First, this isn't going to be the partnership you proposed. This is going to be an acquisition. Pinnacle Strategic Solutions is going to purchase Chen and Associates outright." My father's face went white. "An acquisition? But that means I'm going to own the company you spent 30 years building. The company you were so afraid I'd ruin that you refused to let me be part of it." The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. "Second," I continued, "you're all going to keep working there. Dad, you'll stay on as a senior consultant. Jake, you'll remain in client relations. Emma, if you want, there's a position for you heading up our new marketing department." I paused, letting that sink in. Working for me. Taking direction from me. Learning from the daughter you thought wasn't smart enough to succeed in the family business. Jake started to protest, but I held up my hand. "Third, and this is non-negotiable. We're going to do this right. No more cutting corners. No more playing it safe. No more limiting yourselves to small regional clients. We're going big. And we're going to transform not just Chen and Associates, but the entire consulting landscape in the Pacific Northwest." I leaned forward again, my voice taking on the kind of intensity that had closed hundreds of deals over the years. "By this time next year, the company Dad built is going to be 3 times larger than it's ever been. You're going to have offices in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Vancouver. You're going to be working with clients you never dreamed you could land, and you're going to be successful in ways you never imagined possible." I sat back, letting the vision settle over them. "And every single day, you're going to remember that it happened because the daughter you dismissed, the daughter you excluded, the daughter you thought would fail spectacularly, turned out to be the most successful business person in the family." The silence that followed was different from the earlier shock. This was the silence of people trying to process not just what had happened, but what was going to happen next. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice shaky but determined. "Hallie, sweetheart, I know we have a lot to make up for. I know we hurt you, and I know saying sorry isn't enough, but you're still our daughter. And if you'll have us, we'd like to be your family again." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had raised me, loved me, and completely failed to see me for who I really was. "Mom," I said softly, "you never stopped being my family. That was never the question. The question was whether you were the kind of family worth having." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city where I'd built my empire. "I'll sign the acquisition papers tomorrow. Sarah will handle all the legal details. By January 15th, Chen and Associates will officially become a subsidiary of Pinnacle Strategic Solutions." I turned back to face them. And as for Christmas dinner, I smiled. And for the first time in 8 days, it felt genuine. "I'll be there, not because I need your approval anymore, but because I want to see the look on Victoria's family's faces when they realize they're meeting one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Seattle." Jake looked at Victoria, who was still processing everything that had happened. "I think," Victoria said slowly, "that my family is going to be very impressed." Emma laughed, a sound that was part relief, part amazement, part something that might have been pride. "Hallie," she said, "I don't think any of us are going to know how to act around you now." "Just act like I'm your sister," I replied. "That's all I ever wanted." As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, my father lingered behind the others. "Hallie," he said quietly, "I was wrong. About everything. About you. About what you were capable of. About what success looks like. I was wrong. And I'm sorry." I nodded, accepting the apology I'd waited 17 years to hear. "I know, Dad, and I forgive you. But more importantly, I've finally learned to forgive myself for caring so much about proving you wrong." He smiled then, a real smile, and for a moment he looked like the father I'd remembered loving before everything got complicated. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "I should have said that 17 years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you, and I can't wait to see what you do next." After they all left, I stood alone in the conference room, watching the Seattle skyline as the December sun began to set. Sarah appeared beside me, her tablet in hand. "So," she said, "how does it feel to finally tell them the truth?" I thought about it for a moment, surprised by the answer. Anticlimactic, actually. I spent so many years imagining this moment, building up to it, planning exactly what I would say and how they would react. But now that it's over, I shrugged. Now I realize the best revenge really was just living well. Everything else was just drama. Sarah smiled. "So what's next?" I turned away from the window and walked toward my office. "Next, we integrate Chen and Associates into our operations and turn them into the powerhouse I know they can be. Next, we expand into 3 new markets and double our revenue by the end of next year. Next, we prove that success isn't about beating your family. It's about building something so amazing that everyone else wants to be part of it." I paused at the doorway and looked back at the conference room where my old life had officially ended and my new one had begun. "And next Christmas," I said with a smile, "we're going to have the best damn family dinner the Chen family has ever seen. Because that's what winners do. We don't just prove people wrong, we make them grateful to have been wrong about us."